Testing again? Yeah, it's working. Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name is Claire Chalier. I'm the new head of secretariat for the Mainstreaming Climate Initiative. I'm joined here by two of my colleagues, Alice and Sarah, also representing the secretariat. And we're very happy on behalf of the secretariat, but also of IDFC, who I take this opportunity to thank for organizing and hosting this event for us today. To be organizing this side event on how to start the mainstreaming climate journey. So we're very pleased to have you all here today with us, and very pleased to be joined by our 4 panelists. So 2 of them are here with us today, and 2 of us will be with us online a bit later on. We also have the honor to be welcoming 2 very high-level speakers today. The first one here I'll be introducing in a second will be providing the keynote presentation, and then we'll be joined a little bit later on for the concluding remarks. So we'll probably start by handing the floor over to you, Mr. Brahim Benjeloun, who is Director, General Manager of Bank of Africa, and we're very happy to have you here today for you to introduce us to your journey mainstreaming climate into your institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, first, for your invitation to have this keynote speech. But I have first, we joined the mainstream climate climate action financial institution in 2016. And actually, and I will talk about the journey, of course. I have the conviction, and we have the conviction, that we are at dawn, a new shape of finance. I don't want to be pompous by saying that, but the deep conviction is that despite the very strong challenges that the world is witnessing, there are these fantastic opportunities actually to invent a new shape of finance. At the beginning of this 21st century, the conviction is that the 21st century started with post-pandemic era, as much as last century, the 20th century started with the end of the World War I. And to what extent it's new? Finance is no more a question of silos, of private or public, bilateral or multilateral institutions. It's not a question of equity against debts or against mezzanine. It's all joining forces to invent something which should not more be just capital. It should be capital, at the same time maybe grant, subsidies, advice, guarantee, insurance, all in one, distributed by bankers as one-stop shop, and all these people joining this endeavor in order to make out of these products and services something innovative, something attractive, something profitable, and progressively becoming mainstream finance. And it joins the name of this very interesting initiative of mainstreaming climate action in financial institutions. And it is with these convictions that we adhered the first time to this initiative. And we embarked in this sustainable finance. Actually, it was in 2008 when the Bank of Africa sealed an accord with IFC, $70 million, I remember. And among the provisions of this accord, the fact to set up a social and environment management system. And at that time, I remember our legal counselor said, "What are you doing, Mr. Benjeloun? You're accepting something which will be hard to undertake." And we started, I remember, and Soraya is here with me, she can witness, because we started, both of us, in an institution where classical bankers, I'm sorry to say that, we're not really thinking of that as a serious matter. Is it ecology? Is it political convictions which lead you to take such commitments? So just to answer to this question of how was our journey, it started first of all with, I would say, a vision of a chairman who supported this, I would say, part of what we considered at the outset as a corporate social responsibility. We are proud to say that we are rated extra financially by Moody's. Moody's bought an extra financial rating agency called Eris, Vigeo Eris, and we are considered as the first emerging bank, Moody's, first emerging bank among 90 that they rate, 90, in terms of CSR. We are the second corporate out of a universe of 900 corporate that they are rating in emerging market in terms of CSR, and the 30th, 30, in a universe of approximately 4,900 corporates that they are rating. So it's part, I mean, we started with the vision, with the conviction that CSR is at the heart, should be at the heart of our strategy, and this kind of initiative is absolutely part of our DNA. So this vision, or this involvement of the top management, I have the privilege to be I would say, ranked number 2 after the chairman, founding, I would say, chairman of the group, Mr. Othman Benjeloun. So we have instilled this in our strategic orientation, and it sets the tone to integrate sustainable development. The second elements of our journey was partnering. Very important. It's the SDG number 17, but we have always thought that partnering is a way to accelerate what you are undertaking, and here we partnered with from the basis of our best impact endeavors, and as I said, we started with IFC, but also we have international development institutions like EBRD here present, also IFD Proparco, the Dutch FMO, the EIB, the German KfW, the Belgian BIO. And I'm continuing on the journey, I took notes. Of course, we have updated our policies. We started in 2011 having an environment policy to manage direct impact. We consider that we should be credible by starting to apply to ourselves what we are asking clients to do, i.e. we undertook the process of certifying ourselves for the environment and social management system. It's the ISO 14001, and then energy efficiency, the ISO 50001. So it was very important to have this, and that for the moment we have gone beyond that in order to apply ESG and climate lens to our portfolio using UNEPFI tool and the PRB principles. Very important. So we started to review our portfolio. So we published a group, Sustainability and CSR, in 2018 with 6 commitments, including sustainable finance and especially climate-related KPIs. Right. The fourth, I would say, milestone in our journey, as I said, sustainability and CSR is a strategic pillar for the last 15 years. and it helped us anticipate the advent of regulations in Morocco, essentially. And now that our environment and social management system is mature, it helped us integrate the climate risk which were instilled in the Bank Al Maghrib, the Central Bank of Morocco regulation. Now we continue anticipating this regulation by building capacity, and for example, we, of course, through my colleagues, interacted with mainstreaming initiative and with the esteemed DFIs and other leading banks. We also set up, I have the privilege to chair this committee, a committee called Environment, Social and Sustainability Committee, where we have DFIs sitting in it. Our shareholder, the B2Is, now I call British International Investment, former CDC Group. They are part of the ESS, and ESS is monitoring all the actions that we're undertaking in terms of sustainable finance. Almost last, we consider that we should not talk about this climate issues only in terms of risks, but in terms of opportunities. Very important in the mindset of our customers, but also within our institutions. So we developed many products related, and what I called earlier the blended finance products, related to energy efficiency, related to waste management, to water management. What else? And I will finish. I hope that I'm not too long. Yes, we also, we are about to issue in 2023. That's why we consider that beyond partnership, that we have also to have recourse to market mechanisms. In 2016, we were the first in Morocco to issue a green bond. Now we're about to issue a social bond. So it's, and of course, building capacity, training is key. We do it with our partners. And last but not least, of course, will continue being part of mainstream climate action. And we intend to continue integrated until it's full, the environment, climate, and social factors into the investment philosophy and strategy in order to be able to sustainably finance the energy transitions of companies in the Kingdom of Morocco, but also beyond in Africa. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you. Testing. Thank you very much, Mr. Benjeloun, for this very insightful presentation of what a commercial institution like yours has been doing to get to where they are today. It's very interesting, and I think lots of financial institutions will relate to the fact that you need to take it step by step, have a vision that's carried by top management, and then you can get a long way with this. So thank you very much for that. What I'm going to do now is try to deliver a short presentation of the stock take we, as Secretariat of the mainstreaming climate finance institutions, have observed in the past couple of years, to take you through the key developments on mainstreaming climate. So yeah, we can start the slides. Thank you. So just, I mean, we've been talking about the initiative, but just to summarize what we do, essentially is we try to help public and private financial institutions to get together and have a free space for them to exchange so there's developing economy, developing financial institutions from both developed and developing economies that are represented, and we provide a space where they can exchange freely on what they do to mainstream climate in their operations and activities. So yes, next slide, please. Sorry. So based on what was based on the Paris Agreement, what we provide is a space for the financial institutions to better reflect and manage climate-related risks and opportunities. We also look at how climate considerations are disseminated within and across the organizations, and we support also the discussions on how to align financial flows in line with Paris Agreement. So today we're a network of 53 public and private financial institutions from across the world, different sizes, different shapes, and really that we're very proud of that because we started off quite recently, just after COP21, and so we grew quite fast, and quite a few financial institutions have been joining us and have been very active in the discussion. So we're very proud of giving them this space to exchange and to share their practices. Oh, so we have a few. We've been trying to discuss with some of our partner institutions. So this was from one of Mr. Benjaoud's colleagues, Amal Ben Aissa, who's been one of our main contacts with the institution. But we see ourselves as the only initiative that brings together public and private financial institutions to exchange on climate mainstreaming, and that really is what I think is most appreciated by our supporting institutions today. So the institution is structured around 5 voluntary principles on mainstreaming climate action within financial institutions. So we did work on the initiative was created based on a common definition of what climate mainstreaming is about, and then we declined it. We broke it down into 5 different principles. So I probably won't go into them into too much detail, but we have a resource navigator which provides very detailed steps on how to undertake these 5 different principles and what it means for financial institutions. But essentially, principle 1 is about how to mainstreaming climate across the strategy, the government, the architecture, and down into the procedures of the institution. Principle 2, is about managing climate-related risks, whether they be physical, transition risks or liability risks. Principle 3 is about promoting climate-smart objectives through specific climate finance instruments or through blending, attracting finance to these objectives. And it's also about reflecting on how to make sure that the financing goes to has a real impact on the economy. Principle 4 is about climate performance and how you measure and track this climate performance, volumes, shares, and so on, and in terms of both alignment and climate action. And Principle 5 is about how you report all these actions that you've been undertaking. So it's a very comprehensive framework, and the objective really is to structure discussions and provide a framework for financial institutions that are at the beginning of their mainstreaming journey, but also for the ones that are more advanced. So this is one of the quotes that one of our colleagues from AFD had. She said that the 5 voluntary principles for mainstreaming climate should become the new standard guiding financial institutions in their alignment journey. So we have also been told very recently that one of our supporting institutions, a private one, has been reporting based on these 5 different principles. So really we see that these principles englobe the whole mainstreaming climate journey. So in practice what we do to mainstream these different principles in and across the financial institutions to support them with that journey is we provide supporting institutions with exposure to best practices, so by getting them to meet together and giving them access to professionals and peers that work on the same issues as them and have faced the same barriers and have the same opportunities and how to identify them. We work based on a program of webinars and events, so both events like today's event, but also events that we hold all along the year on different subjects that we identify with our supporting institutions. And we also provide finance professionals with the opportunity to discuss with different teams and different practitioners from other supporting institutions. So connecting partners with other institutions they probably would have more difficulties to connect with otherwise. So next slide, please. So just to take you through the main highlights of what we've observed when we did our biannual review this year. It's just about to be published. That's just been published actually online a few days ago. Of the key highlights we've observed as the Secretariat of the initiative in terms of climate mainstreaming first. So we see, and this was I think mentioned by Mr. Benjamin a second ago, but that setting a climate finance target is still a very good starting point, a very good first major milestone for lots of financial institutions, is a way to start off from somewhere. We also see now that more and more financial institutions are broadening this ambition and are looking more and more at impact targets, trying to look at how their actions actually translate into impacts on the real economy. We've also observed that exclusion lists have been recently updated, and there's been a lot of thought about what they mean today and how they have an impact also on the real economy, and how you should potentially revise targets to stop investing in some activities that are not that don't have a positive impact on climate. We've also been observing that more and more financial institutions have been updating their climate strategies and their sector policies to increase their support to mitigation, to adaptation, to both, and also to align more broadly all their operations with the Paris Agreement objectives. We have been increasingly seeing front runners in financial institutions essentially mainstreaming other considerations such as biodiversity or gender considerations at the same time as climate change. There's a lot of reflection also around that at the moment in front runner financial institutions. So now if we look at Paris alignment, which is one of the second one of the three aspects that we've been looking at, we see that a growing number of financial institutions have been committing over the past couple of years to align all their operations and their activities with climate goals. These different alignment commitments and approaches have been often focusing on one or several, but often one of the climate aspects. So often on mitigation, with all the net zero coalitions that have been created, the financial institutions that have been getting together based on these commitments, and guidance that has been developed to assess the reduction of financing activities, for instance, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And these coalitions that have been getting together under umbrellas, under initiatives such as the GFANZ. These coalitions are also developing principles to assess alignment of portfolios with adaptation objectives. In some instances, more and more, we've been seeing they've been looking also at how they contribute to adaptation, not just how their portfolios are adapted, but also how they contribute to adaptation. And approaches for assessing the alignment of clients has also been developed. So we see more and more research on how to look at how we should consider counterparts and clients and who we finance and not just what we've been financing. We see that transition and resilient plans have been considered as important tools to look at this engagement of clients with in relation to climate objectives. And the development finance institutions have been providing support to their counterparts and clients to be working in that direction and improving their alignment with climate finance goals. And in terms of climate risk management now, which is the last focus we had on in this report, we've been seeing an increasing number of climate risk methodologies that have been developed. Quite a few of them now are available on market. Some financial institutions have also chosen to develop their own approaches in-house, which they've adapted. Transition plans have been considered to support client-level transition risk assessment, so it's often been used as one of the starting points to look at transition risk. More and more financial institutions have also been looking at physical climate risks, and in France, for instance, these physical risks have become part of regulatory stress testing. Also, financial institutions have started working on climate-related liability risk, which is quite new, and have been looking at how this has an impact on their assets and transactions. And we see that institutions such as UNEP-FI and the ANGFS have been supporting these developments. Scenario analysis has been used also to ensure that the deep uncertainties is properly integrated in the different scenarios that have been developed. And the last thing we wanted to highlight today, also in terms of climate risk management, was the fact that we see more and more experiences highlighting the need to set sector targets and to manage both exposure and contribution to transitioning the sector level. Now, just in terms of what the initiative, because this is our first event, the first event that the initiative is organising at COP. We'll be having 4 more initiatives organised under this, or 4 more events organised under this pavilion. So just wanted to summarise these here today, but we'll look forward to the discussions. And so this event is the introduction to the rest of the events. Basically, they'll be taking place until the end of next week. So I think now, with all this in mind and all these different highlights that we've observed and the recent developments, we see that there are as many mainstreaming climate journeys as there are financial institutions, and all the financing institutions have started somewhere, and they're all taking their own pathways to get to the same objectives. What we are going to do now is we're going to hear from our 4 panelists that have taken the time to be here today. So I wanted to thank them for that. So I'll probably start with those that are here physically with us today. So we have to the right here next to me, we have Maya, so I'm sorry if I'm going to pronounce this properly, but Henriques, thank you, who is Director of Green Financial Systems, Climate Strategy and Delivery Group at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So thank you for being here. And we also have to her left, Lorenzo Tigre, so I hope that's all right too, who is Director of Financial Divisions and Controlling Division for the Brazilian National Development Bank, BNDES. Online, we also have, thank you very much, we have Nancy Saish, who is Climate Change Expert at the European Investment Bank. Hello, Nancy. Yeah, I see that you're unmuted, so that's fine. And we also have Damien Navizet, our Climate Expert from the Caisse des Dépôts in France today. So thank you very much, the 4 of you, for being here. What we would like to do, and what we actually did to prepare our biannual report, is to hear from you on your individual mainstreaming climate journeys and see where you started from and where you got to. Essentially, we'd like to hear from the key lessons that you would like to share with other financial institutions who would be at the beginning of their journey, and what you would tell them if you were them today, where you would start. That would be our first question, and then we'll have another question in the second round. Shall I start with you, Maya? Would that be okay? Yeah? I'll pass them. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I have 3 slides, although I'm probably going to go off script quite a bit. It's probably a bit more interesting to just talk about this. Well, perhaps while this is coming up, by ways of introduction, I think following the TCFD logic, I think our EBRD journey has, it started from when we were founded. In our founding papers 30 years ago, it was already enshrined that we are only to support environmentally sustainable and socially sustainable investments. So this has been wired into our DNA from the beginning. We have, of course, 30 years of experience with mainstreaming environmental social risk management into all EBRD operations, and also now very, very many years of really dedicated climate action and climate risk considerations. So I think today, following the TCFD logic, I think we're at a point where on the governance level, we have, a fully fledged approach. We follow the 3 lines of defense model. We obviously do not wish to contribute to greenwashing. So while the client services group is structuring the climate and the green components of the operations and providing technical assistance, providing the methodologies, we then have from the risk department the verification, also the MRV end of our green financing. In the strategy piece, and I will talk a bit more about that, we have our green economy transition approach, under which we've committed to be a majority green bank by 2025. That means that 50% or more of our new financing or annual additional and new financing will be dedicated for green. And we also have our Paris alignment approach, which I'll also explain a little bit about, which will go into force very, very soon at the end of this year. Then in our risk management approach, of course, we establish a climate risk score for all our transactions, whether that's direct investments or financial institution counterparties. And we also, of course, apply the environmental social policy with our more comprehensive ESG risk management system. And then on the metrics side, of course, we measure, we report. So we've just a few days ago issued our third TCFD report, so you can check that out. And of course, we also issue an annual sustainability report where you can find all sorts of data on our sustainability green financing efforts. So maybe just to go briefly about the two main hard pieces, I think, in the strategy, because that tells you a little bit about our mainstreaming journey, but it also tells you a little bit about how we are trying to work with other financial institutions that we lend to or that we invest in on their own mainstreaming journey, which I think both perspectives are perhaps of interest to this conversation. So I mentioned our green economy transition approach. This is really the green finance. We have our own taxonomy, if you want to call it that way. What counts? What do we consider to be green? And as I mentioned, 50% of our financing or more by 2025 should be destined to that. However, we have realized that we're getting a little bit to the limits. We cannot easily keep increasing that percentage, because of course we also have other impact targets. We also have impact targets for diversity and inclusion. We have impact targets for digitization. So just upping the green more and more and more we're getting to our limits, to be honest. There's social infrastructure that we want to support, for example. Now, of course, we're trying to link green and other impacts as much as we can, but it's not always possible. So it was important for us to say, okay, what do we do with the rest? We want to make sure, as a responsible investor and as a multilateral development bank, which comes, of course, with its specific mandate, that all our financing does not go at least against the goals of the Paris Agreement, which is why we've developed our own methodology for Paris alignment. And actually, I think we can probably move to the next slide. Oh, this is in a different order. Oh, they were there already? Okay, yeah, let's take this one. This is just to explain how Paris alignment and green finance sit together, because sometimes I see that people are a little bit confused. So Paris alignment for us, as of the end of this year, will be all of our financing. That means that there cannot be any further EBRD financing that contradicts the goals of the Paris Agreement or that's misaligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Again, we're already piloting it, of course, and we're almost ready, but we will have this fully into force by the end of this year. And then the green economy transition approach is really the dedicated green finance. So 50% and then the 100% for Paris alignment. And I think with that we can go to the next slide. I don't even look at these that much, so I probably don't actually need them. So Paris alignment approach for us, we are following, and Nancy will probably mention that as well, or if not, she can attest to it. We have, of course, we work together with our sister MDBs and partner MDBs we have developed common principles for Paris alignment, because we think it's very important that we approach this in a similar way. And so this is based on that. And then, of course, in addition, it is also based on our already quite comprehensive fossil fuel exclusions that we already apply. So we have certain exclusions that are enshrined in our environmental social policy. That's mainly the coal financing and the upstream oil financing. But we also have an energy strategy from which we've derived a fossil fuel approach, which has way further limited our financing for fossil fuels. So this is sort of the minimum threshold on which this is anchored. And then Paris alignment approach, you can find this on our website if you're geeky enough to wanting to look into the nitty-gritty detail. We started thinking about it and figured out it's quite different whether we look at an investment directly into a corporate or intermediated financing through financial institutions. So we have two different approaches. They're both similar in the sense that they have the same principles, and they both obviously anchored in the MDB principles, but the way we do it with corporates, because there we can assess directly the project, and we can directly assess, okay, is there a risk of carbon lock-in? Is this project in line with a low carbon pathway? And when we have contested to that, then we consider it Paris aligned. For the financial institutions, it's a bit more complex, because we have in the past had a very narrow focus on our use of proceeds. And our use of proceeds, in many, many cases, we can be confident that it is Paris aligned, but we cannot always say. So for example, when we take equity in a financial institution, or when we support the issuance of a bond that is maybe not, does not have a defined use of proceeds, then we struggle. So we had this idea that we're going to really change our focus from this narrow use of proceeds model to a counterparty model. So we'll be working with financial institutions much more holistically to get them on the journey with us. And we have 4 pillars for our Paris alignment with financial institutions. The first one is they will have to commit. So clients of EBRD going forward, they will have to commit, let's say on an anchor transaction, on that first transaction that we'll be discussing, that they're generally in agreement that we are working towards the goals of the Paris Agreement. Then we're going to have 2 approaches or 2 pathways, which is only temporary in a way, because we have about 350 financial institution clients, and we can't work with all of them in a very comprehensive way at the same time. We have to sort of ramp this up over a period of time. So our ramp up period will be approximately 5 years, we've calculated. So we're starting those new transactions where we know the use of proceeds, there's really absolutely negligible risk of misalignment. So for example, a green line. We know what's in a green line. We have eligibility criteria that are so stringent, there's no risk of misalignment. A lot of our SME business, we know that the risk of misalignment is really negligible. So for those, we will investigate the use of proceeds, and we will satisfy ourselves that this is Paris aligned. Now, when we don't know, because there's no defined use of proceeds, or because the use of proceeds shows us, oh, there could be things that, you know, maybe could present a risk of misalignment, then we will apply our pillar 3, which is we're going to run them through a very much more extensive Paris alignment assessment. And through this assessment, it's not only for us, it's also for the FI client to learn, okay, where are we on this journey? Are we beginners level? Are we intermediate practices? Or are we really developing already advanced practice? And based on this assessment, Pillar 4, we will then work with our FI clients to develop transition plans. And these transition plans, they will become part of our agreement. So this is sort of the pathway. We need a little bit of time, because I think collectively we all know that nobody has yet figured out exactly what needs to be in the perfect transition plan for our financial institutions, but we have good ideas. It's a fast evolving space, so there will probably be, we will learn collectively a lot over the next few years, so we're kind of flexible in adapting here and there as we see that things improve. But yeah, this is roughly how our own journey was, from, you know, general risk management to green targets to then full Paris alignment approach, and now we're taking our clients with us on that same journey.
Thank you very much, Maya. It was very interesting. It did summarize what we were just talking about. Interesting as well to see how you integrate it at different levels within your institution and outside now. So maybe I'll move it over to you, Lorenzo, if that's okay, and then we'll move over to our participants online, our panelists online. So yeah, floor is yours, Lorenzo. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss this important theme. And I want to congratulate you on the initiative and the results so far. I think that this is, from a financial perspective, one of the missing elements is how we can better measure the impacts and the actions that financial institutions take. And as Maya just alluded to, we're all struggling to a certain extent and trying to create the appropriate approach towards reaching the needed goals in terms of a net zero, and in special if you're talking about an emerging economy, but I think that this is relevant to other countries as well, is making sure that we can have a just transition. I think that this is, from our perspective at BNDES, one of the key elements is how we can make sure that social and environment can walk the same path together. And this is one of the issues that we concentrate most of our initiatives towards. I'll give you a little bit of a background in terms of what BNDES has done over the years and what where we find ourselves at this point. We created a environmental department a little over 30 years ago, before the climate conference in Rio 1992. And we have since spent a significant amount of time and effort in developing that department to a point where today our goal is to extinguish the sustainability and environmental department and make sure that this is across the board. Every department at BNDES is to a certain extent knowledgeable in the environment and sustainability. So it's transitioning from being a departmental approach towards an institutional approach. And this is an effort that we've had in terms of reskilling our people, starting with top management and now with the whole of the institution, in particular in the theme of climate. So I think that this is very important for financial institutions in general, in order to have the principles for mainstreaming actually being able to be applied. We need to make sure that we can have our teams knowledgeable. We will at the bank, just as ways of an example, we are starting at the end of this year, and it's going to go until the end of the first quarter of next year, a comprehensive training program to all our employees to make sure that we do the first step into understanding a little bit about climate, carbon, and all that comes along with it. So I think that this is one of the important steps. BNDES, as some of you may know, is one of the largest financiers of renewable energies in the world. And it's only natural given that Brazil has 84% of its electric matrix renewable. But what we've learned also, and this is, I think, a key message that we've learned with time, and that we're also spending a significant amount of effort trying to make sure that we can improve, is that for decades, BNDES, given the ways that its funding structure operated, we, with subsidized rates, we were crowding out private sector. So we had a bad combination, if you will, of the crowding out of the private sector on the one hand, and a lack of good projects on the other. And what we have done over the past 6 years is created mechanisms where we, as a development bank, we work to induce and to attract private capital into the economy. I mean, a country like Brazil, and again, so many other emerging economies, we have a significant infrastructure gap in pretty much every angle you look into. And the only way to bridge that gap is if you can combine well-structured projects on the one hand and the attraction of private capital on the other. Otherwise, it's unattainable. So we have been working over the past 4 years in particular in making sure that we have a very solid pipeline of projects. In particular, when you think about environmental assets, we now in Brazil, we hold what you can say is the largest environmental asset portfolio in the world, with over 18 million hectares in parks and forests. So this is just a first step. It's just a small portion of the potential that Brazil has, but it's a first step. And we have been working on crowding in private capital. And as Brahim mentioned, we have to go from just being a unidimensional capital base into a multi-dimensional approach. So it has. We have. That's personal, I guess. Hello.
No, they're not working anymore. We just swapped, they're not working. This one's working.
Okay. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. So going back to the multidimensional capitals, this is one of the biggest transformation I think we are seeing around the world, and BNDES as other development banks have been following the same path. And I'm going to mention a couple of initiatives that I think that are worth noting when we think about the mainstreaming climate for financial institutions. The first one is what we now call the impact factory. So we created again, concern about just transition and being concerned about the impact at the last mile, how we can actually use our capital, use our ability to originate projects to create impact on the last mile. We created a pipeline of match funding initiatives, and my colleague Bruno Aranha is sitting here with me. He's responsible at the bank for that effort, and we started during the pandemic. Is one of the good things that we ended up getting from the pandemic. It's a match funding in pretty much every sector in the economy, but health, environment, education. So this allows as an attraction for private capital with a concern with what's happening in the last mile. Last year at COP, we launched a match funding for the reforestation and restoration of degraded areas that has up to now reached a total of close to $200 million in capital. That's going to be shared, part of it by BNDES, the other part by partners, over 15 partners that will invest in the reforestation and restoration of the degraded areas in the country. This is important not only for the act of the reforestation itself, but because this is going to be a significant lab in terms of understanding the economics that's behind, the social impact that this is going to lead, and how we can scale this up so that we can have this attack the deforestation issue, bringing financial capital into again the last mile. So this is one of the ways to do that. The other initiative that it's also very important in reaching this impact and making sure that we can attract capital is a blend finance initiative, where we are focused on the bioeconomy, how we can attract commercial capital into the bioeconomy. And here BNDES, in a pilot program, we are allocating a little less than $20 million in this first program, with the potential to leverage up to, we think, at least 4 times and maybe up to 10 times the capital that we are allocating as grant. And the interesting fact is that we had demand in this initiative for close to 1 billion reais, so $200 million in grants. So this shows, it's again a first step that shows how deeply we can affect the economy once we bring private capital with the ability that we as development banks have to originate projects and make sure that the governance is there so that we reduce any image risk that can be associated with it.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. I think that was also very interesting to see what you as a national development bank have been, the challenges you've been facing and the solutions you've been finding to overcome them, and how you seek to be transformational as well at your level. Thank you very much. I'll pass the floor over to one of you two, maybe Nancy, to start off with, if that's okay, to hear you on your mainstreaming journey. Nancy, can you hear me? I think you're unmuted, so that's why.
Hear me okay?
Oh yes, we can hear you quite loudly, actually. Wait, we'll try and sort that out. Thank you.
I'll try
You,
and
you can
be
start. You can
quiet.
start there. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay. We haven't got a lot of time, so I'm going to have to pick some interesting things. I think the thing that I wanted to say is that, like the previous two speakers, we started a long time ago with certain individual things. So issuing the first green bond in 2007, having a climate finance target, which was only for mitigation, starting from 2009. And then gradually starting to bring other things in, so bringing adaptation in alongside mitigation. I think we hosted the first ever IFI working group on greenhouse gas accounting also in 2009, and starting to think about that reporting of impact. Although it's interesting to say that I think at that point when we first went to the management of the bank, they agreed that we should be doing internal carbon footprint, but they were very worried about doing a carbon footprint of the lending. So it just goes to show how things can change. In 20 years, things have changed a lot. So I would say really at the beginning, it was very much an upward approach. It was not a downward approach. So it was people in the bank that knew things had to be done on climate. And we sort of took it step by first coming up with a climate vision, which I think we took to the Warsaw COP in 2013. And then after that, then this was really where the first time we saw really major leadership at the top of the bank coming in, where the vice president said, right, we're going to develop a climate strategy and we're going to do a full public consultation, which had never been done before on any such policies. And that was really our contribution to Paris, was the climate strategy in 2015. Now, what happened, of course, was in Paris, a number of other things happened. One of them was that we had spent the year working on a number of things, including the 5 principles for mainstreaming. And I was actually one of the people that organized the launch of that at Paris. And it was an absolute sellout. I mean, people were being stopped from coming in the room. And I think people were very, very interested in it. And one of the things I remember was that the vice president of CAF, who was on the panel, talked about the additional 6th principle, which was walking the talk. And that's always been, I think, in the back of my mind when we think about mainstreaming, in that it's about supporting clients. But if you're going to support clients, you have to walk the talk yourself. So we took forward that climate strategy. But at the same time, with the other MDBs, we had harmonized finance tracking, and we'd worked on greenhouse gas accounting, as I said. But we looked at Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, and it was really obvious to all of us that we needed to think about this together. And so we brought together a number of different things that we all thought would be useful and important for that Article 2.1c. And one of the things was actually at a midterm review of our climate strategy, which was going on. And while we were doing this, we just said, well, let's look at whether the climate strategy is fit for purpose for Paris alignment. And again, it was just the climate team, just one small part of the bank. But we looked at it and we thought, yeah, actually, it is. It needs a few things. We need to accelerate a few things, but it's pretty much fit for purpose. And at that point, I think it was 2018, there was going to be a climate conference in San Francisco and the climate conference in New York. And this is where our president, I think he just suddenly saw this is absolutely what has to happen. I don't know why exactly. I don't know whether he'd read some articles or whether he'd been to a meeting or whatever it was, but he just got it. And he went to New York in 2018 and said that that by implementing our climate strategy and the action plans around it, that he was confident we would be Paris aligned in all our activity by the end of 2020. And why did we say 2020? Well, that was the end of the 5 years of the action plans of the climate strategy. So we thought, yeah, well, if we do all these things, it'll be fine. We'll be Paris aligned by the end of 2020. I don't think we had any idea just how big a task that was. But sometimes you just need that from the top person giving the very clear direction. And what I would say is that up till that point, I think there were quite a lot of people in the bank that talked about your climate strategy. So you, the climate team, that's your climate strategy. One thing that happened with Paris alignment and the development of the Climate Bank Roadmap was that it became an absolutely bank-wide, absolutely completely bank-wide. Everybody was involved completely, from the treasury to the buildings people, everything. And I think that's that's really the biggest change that I see in the last few years. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details. Obviously, it was based on the 6 building blocks that Maya showed you, that the MDBs had worked out. It's 1.5 strategic alignment. Two things that came out of the public consultation are just probably worth highlighting. One, that we needed to do a lot more on adaptation, which of course is something that you hear at every COP, and in particular this COP. So we developed a specific adaptation plan, which we'd never had before. But two, and that has again been mentioned by the other speakers, there was a huge request for us to look more closely at clients and not just at our projects. And so we developed something which is called PATH, because it's about pathways, and it's about how we support our clients in their transition, whether that's a resilience pathway or a decarbonisation pathway, and that covers corporates and financial intermediaries. The only other thing I might mention, which I think has been very powerful at the bank, is that at the same time we also created something called the Climate and Environment Advisory Council, where after much thought there were a number of really high-level people from around the world and around Europe that were invited to join this council that comes to the bank, every few months, and has a high-level meeting to discuss certain topics with the top management of the bank, to really bring at that level the best and most up-to-date knowledge. And that I think is very powerful and important. And I think I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. That was very interesting indeed as well to hear from you on your mainstreaming journey. And I think there were some things that we're now, some patterns that we're now starting to see, and some messages that are coming back. And one of them that I'll take from this one is, again, how important it is to have your top management supporting the carrying these messages and helping carry them through to the entire institution. Then maybe just then, so we'd like now to hear from Damien Navizet on the mainstreaming journey of the Caisse des Dépôts in France, if that's all right. Actually, I'm being told at the same time that we still have some time, so you can, I mean, because we're running late, but we still have a little bit of time, so just to make that clear. Thank you.
At the same time, perhaps it's best to show the slides I sent, because you're seeing a black, you might be seeing a black screen. So first of all, thank you for having me with you tonight, even if I'm not here in person. I'd like to say a big hi to all the colleagues in the room. I miss being at COPs. Yes, so I am a climate expert with the Caisse des Dépôts in France, and I thought that I should first tell you a little bit about Caisse des Dépôts itself, so that you understand where I'm coming from. Caisse des Dépôts, to put it as plainly as possible, it safeguards and invests on the long term the bulk of the French savings. So on the one hand, we lend long-term for local infrastructure and social housing. And on the other hand, we invest for liquidity purposes. We invest in on the markets, in bonds, in shares, in other financial assets. And over the time, of course, we've also sometimes become the reference shareholders of some large national-scale operators or service providers. So we are a kind of a strange animal with multiple business lines. On the one hand, we are the largest public finance provider in France and the largest institutional investor, and that's a very specific job. On the other hand, we are a key lending partner, an investment partner for the local governments, and we are the reference shareholder of some larger infrastructure and services, of course. So that's for Caisse des Dépôts. And roughly speaking, we have 1.3 trillion euros of assets on our balance sheet. So it's a big, complex institution. So on the mainstreaming journey, many things that have been said I can totally endorse for Caisse des Dépôts. I'll try to be extremely brief. Three main ingredients, plus one, which is time, because you've heard that for everybody it has taken time to go from on this mainstreaming journey. But I'd say that the first ingredient is leadership and clear policy. Nancy mentioned it, of course. So in the case of CDC, it's easy to understand. The big push was in 2015 at COP21 when France hosted the COP. Of course, it helps. So even though CDC had been dealing about climate change before, this was really a very important moment to really kickstart the ambition and devise an actual action plan. It was called the 2 degrees action plan at the time. But of course, that's not enough. Just to start, you have to sustain the momentum. So I thought I should mention that we had a very important aspect at CDC. It's the quick wins. When you have champions in-house who are taking the lead in a way, but on an operational level, not only on the leadership and the policy level, but also at the operational level. So in the case of Caisse de dépôt, it was the investors who trade securities on the market, bonds and shares. They had sufficient methods and data from the get-go to measure their finance carbon footprint and to take targets to decrease it. And in 2019, there was CDC was a founding member of the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, and this is for us the platform for the investor business line, where we set our decarbonization targets. But it's still only a part of our entire group. But it was really like an engine to mainstream using this keyword across the group. And the third is about knowledge. There are many ways to express it. Knowledge can be data. If you want to build a system, you need to have data. Knowledge can be also training, so like skills, if you like. So I like to echo what BNDES said. Training is essential, and training is like sorting the waste. You have to keep it up all the time, and don't assume that because you've trained your staff once, it's going to be okay. You have to come back to it again and again. And knowledge and data is very important for a very important principle of mainstreaming, which is transparency in a way. So if you want to build a system and make it last, you have to start it. Make the first kilometer with the quick wins and the champions, and you have to make it last all the way with a system, and knowledge about what you're doing is essential. So in the case of CDC, I think on this system aspect of things, we are doing fine on green finance. I think it's the case also for the other institutions on the panel. We are doing fine on decarbonizing the investors' portfolio, but where we are still lacking is what Nancy said, the carbon footprint of the lending portfolio, always a tough one to crack, and the risk management also is important and relies heavily on data, and this is also something that we find we don't always have
Damien,
enough data to.
sorry to interrupt. We're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. If you could maybe get a little bit closer to your phone. If.
Okay.
Sorry, that's better, I think. Thank you.
You're welcome. So to summarize, vision and leadership to kickstart, quick wins and champion to sustain the first few miles, and then try to build a system and spread the mainstreaming, which is, I guess, where we all are at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. We did hear you. It was just a little bit from afar at the end. Thank you very much for that very interesting review of your mainstreaming journey, and it's interesting to have the view of another national development bank. I think it mirrors what Lorenzo was saying quite well earlier. Just maybe, so we had a second question for you all, which I think we can be a little bit shorter on, and I don't think any of you have any slides, but we were wondering if you could all give us your views on what you believe are the next frontiers, the next topics for you to work on. I mean, I know we've already touched on some of them, but maybe if you had to choose, I don't know, say 2 or 3, which would you all choose then as key topics to work on for the future. Should we start with you, Maya, again? We'll take it in the same order as earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. For us, well, definitely now it's the actual learning and doing and implementation of the Paris alignment approach. We've piloted it extensively. We have a year and a half worth of experience on the direct investment side. We've piloted this year on the FI side, but of course we'll be learning so much more as we roll this out consistently. So this is one. Second, it was interesting, Lorenzo, that you mentioned the blended finance structures for bioeconomy. So for us, definitely, we're looking to also together with the other MDBs and in light of the COP15 in Montreal coming up to really step it up on nature-based financing. And of course, Nancy has mentioned we're all still trying to crack the nut on adaptation finance, where we are improving and increasing our volumes, but it's not easy, and it's also, again, a little bit more difficult on the intermediated financing side than it is on the direct investment side. So these would be, actually, I think I said 4 now, but yeah, those are mine.
Really quick on my side, the first one, I guess, it's accounting and reporting from not only ourselves but from our clients. We decided that by the end of 2023, all the new loans that BNDES gives will have to have their carbon accounting report. So, and with this, we plan to bring the awareness that's necessary. The second one is making sure that we can expand the reskilling to the last mile, to those that actually are going to need to change to adapt to this new economy, this new green economy. So, and here I think that there are several efforts that we're already putting in place. We started the first one, again, a pilot program in July of this year, and we're hoping to be able to scale it up. And the third one is it's being able to scale our blended finance initiative. We are convinced that blended finance is it's one of the key solutions for making sure that the world can move forward. And we believe that BNDES has the ability to reduce reputational risk on the one hand, and originate well-structured projects on the other, that will allow especially international investors, public and private, to feel comfortable allocating capital in Brazil towards that common goal.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorenzo, for that quick summary, and yeah, very interesting, because they're actually quite different to what Maya was just saying, so it's complimentary. Thank you. We'll take it in the same order as we had it on the first round. So Nancy, you can go next, maybe. Thank you.
Okay. What's the volume like that? Is that okay?
Perfect. Thank you. We can hear you really well.
Okay. Actually, mine are completely different as well, so it's interesting, isn't it? So I've got 3, although one is very big. The first one is advisory services. We are just we're already, and we're anticipating a multiplication of clients asking for help, right? And this is going to link to the second point. Why are they all asking for help? Well, some of them because they know that they need transition plans, they want to know how to develop climate projects, whatever. Some of them because they're being asked by whatever regulator or supervisory authority or their shareholders, and they come to us because they think, well, you're the climate bank, you know how to do this. So massive increase in requests for advice of all kinds around climate and sustainable finance. And that is a huge challenge, because it's not something it is something you can grow over time, but it's not something that you can just do overnight. The second thing is the sustainable finance agenda, which is going on outside. So for a long time, MBBs, and then, hey, we would get together with IDFC, and we would all agree on some methodology, which was very solid. And it was the gold standard, because nobody else was doing it as well as us. And now suddenly the outside world is doing it all. And suddenly shareholders and stakeholders are starting to ask us, why aren't you doing this? Now, of course, some of us are doing TCFD reporting, but it's much wider than that. Taxonomies, this is not just the EU taxonomies around the world. Then people will say, oh, but you have your common principles for climate finance tracking. How does that fit with, the taxonomy in this country or the EU taxonomy? What about disclosures? And most importantly, one of the big challenges, I think, for public banks is looking in their existing portfolio. Now, this is in principle number 2. And when my vice president was on that panel in Paris in 2015, when he was asked, where do you see the big challenge? He said, well, I think we've got things, we're pretty clear what we've got to do for new operations going forward. The big challenge is going to be opening the cupboard and looking in and seeing what's in there. I think we're all still scared of that, but that's what's happening to all of our corporate and financial clients out there. And so we are going to have to get to grips with that. And the difference is when you're a public bank, it's not just about financial risk. Those are your existing clients. And if there's a transition or a physical risk, there may not be the economic benefit of the project. That was the reason you financed it. And anyway, they're a client and you have a duty of care. So I think that issue of support for clients in the portfolio is going to be massive. And the last thing is entirely internal. I call it climate mushrooms. The flip side of it being across the whole organization and everybody's involved is that there's climate popping up everywhere. And whereas it used to be one small team who were doing everything, now we find out stuff is going on. So you need a much more organized structure to kind of make sure that everybody speaks to everybody else and don't go off and do stuff. And I have a particular special kind of climate mushroom, which is happening all the time at the moment, which is climate risk mushrooms. It's a kind of special thing, but again, it's popping up everywhere. And I think that all organizations that have done this mainstreaming will eventually reach that point where they find it's great because everybody's being a climate champion, but you also need a much stronger coordination to know what's going on across the organization. And that's my third one. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. Yes, I think everybody understands what you mean. It's interesting again to see very different views on that. And I think now we can probably see what Damien has to say. Are yours different too, Damien, or will you be summarizing what your three colleagues have been saying?
I have three as well, but adaptation was already mentioned. So I'll skip to the second one. So the second one is transparency. And so Nancy mentioned it about disclosing even the basic data on what you finance on climate. It's always a struggle. Sometimes for good reasons, because your systems are not geared towards transparency, for example, or sometimes for not so good reasons. But perhaps I'll focus on my last one, which is in the case of Caisse des Dépôts, it's how to ensure consistency across very diverse business lines, like investors, lenders, and we also have operators in the real world, in the real economy. And we are supposed to align everything on 1.5-degree scenarios. And there's just no way we can even dream of computing the carbon footprint of this all without double counting and so on and so forth. So we had to think it through. And this is our frontier at the moment. What we are trying to do is to measure the financial assets, so in terms of money, not in terms of CO2, but in terms of money, which are being managed with a 1.5-degree scenario in mind. So it means if you have a portfolio of shares, listed equity, where you have taken an ambitious 1.5-degree compatible target, then this, okay, it's in your basket. It's managed in the right way. But for lending, for example, if you're lending to green infrastructure, okay, this can be put in your basket because it's like renewable energy, for example. Or if you're lending to a state, for example, you're buying bonds from the sovereign bonds, let's say France, for example, because I'm French. Perhaps I can say France is committed to carbon neutrality, and France has a national strategy on mitigation, and we have all the targets until 2050. Can I say that my French sovereign bond is also covered by the targets of France? And this is ambitious enough. So can I put it in my basket? So the idea is that we will start somewhere, and of course we're not 100% at the moment. We'll start somewhere, and we'll try to have plans for each asset class in our portfolio to increase the share of this money which is managed with the 1.5-degree scenarios in mind. I think this is sure to be a common challenge for any financial institutions with a diverse range of products. And that's all for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Gone again. Oh, come back. Thank you, Damien, for that very nice summary. I'm standing up now because I think we're reaching the end of this side event. Yeah, we were expecting Rémi Rioux to be with us today, but I can't see him. I believe he's been caught up in another event. So I think we're lucky enough to have Beryl here today, Beryl Bouteille, who's the head of the IDFC Secretariat. So she'll be providing the concluding remarks for us today. Thank you, Beryl.
Thank you, Claire. And first, I want to apologize on behalf of Rémi Rioux. So he couldn't join us this evening, so he asked me to replace him. So I'll do my best to replace him today and to provide you with some conclusion. So first, I wanted to thank you, Claire, and the team, and for the great work done by MCI, the Mainstreaming Climate Initiative, to share knowledge, experiences, and best practices on climate finance, and to maintain a community of practitioners on climate finance as well. This community actually includes both public and private financial institutions, which I believe is quite unique in the financial community. And all of this has been reflected in your biannual report, so congratulations on your work and for the report as well. Second, so I have two hats this evening, both AFD and IDFC, since AFD is currently chairing IDFC. So I will start by sharing a few milestones of AFD's mainstreaming journey, which started in 2007 with the development of a carbon footprint tool. Then a climate strategy in 2012 with an ambitious target to dedicate 50% of AFD's commitment to climate-related projects. And then AFD participated in the definition of the common principles together with IDFC and MDBs. It has already been discussed with Maya and Nancy. Then in 2017, AFD became actually the first development bank to commit to be 100% aligned with the objective of the Paris Agreement. Overall, since COP 21, AFD doubled its climate finance from 3 billion to 6 billion for a total of 30 billion of climate finance since 2015. I want also to share a few words on the IDFC climate mainstreaming journey. I promise I won't be too long. First, with the green finance mapping, which started with the creation of the IDFC in 2011. The green finance mapping is really the flagship report of IDFC, where all IDFC members report on their climate and green commitments. And in 2021, IDFC reported a record high of 24 billion of green and climate finance, which represents a 20% increase in comparison with 2020. So we already spoke about the common principles, but IDFC also commits to align with the Paris Agreement objective in 2017. A year later, we defined through a position paper what does it mean to align with the Paris Agreement, and we also disclosed a report on the operationalization of Paris alignments. A last word on our IDFC climate facility, which is our operational arm to strengthen the capacities of our members on climate finance as well. So what I want to say maybe as the last words is it has been a long journey for all of us, but we know that we still have some work to do, and some key topics are still ahead of us, and you shared with us a few of them. First, to continue to mainstream climate, but also nature considerations together in FI strategies, operations, and risk management. Also to support our clients and the alignment of financial intermediaries. To support just energy transition pathways and long-term strategies. Also to measure our real impact, the impact of our financing beyond the reporting of our financing on climate finance. Also to define what it means for a financial institution to be a net zero. And I believe to do so, what we could certainly strengthen and support a renewed dialogue between public finance, so with IDFC, with MDBs, and the coalition of public development banks through the Finance in Common initiative. Of course, the private sector, and behind this, the defense initiative, and the regulators through the NGFS. So I'll stop here, maybe. This will be my final words to call for this renewed dialogue and renewed financial architecture with the view to align all financial chains with the objective of the Paris Agreement. Thank you again, Claire and MCI for this side event.
Thank you very much, Beryl. Thank you. I'm just turning over to my colleague Alice to see whether or not the cocktail has arrived, because I think there's been a bit of an issue with that. No. Is it worth waiting, or what should we? Because we did remind them earlier on to be on time, and obviously they've forgotten about us. But yeah, I know. Well, yeah. Should we just leave it at that then? And yeah, okay. Well, sorry about that. We were hoping to be able to offer some refreshers after the event, and unfortunately it's not going to be possible, so hopefully next time. Thank you very much to the panelists again for being here today. And merci, oui, Damien, and thank you, Nancy, for being with us online. And thank you, Mr. Benjamin, as well, for joining us. Special thanks for that. We really appreciate it. Thank you.